So I've noticed there's like a lot of concepts that I internalized at a young age and even over applied and I'm having to unlearn that most people haven't heard of at all and don't even seem to understand the concept. And one of those, one of the most important, I think, is the idea of opportunity costs, which is that if you are spending your time, your money, your attention, your energy on one thing, there's an infinity of other things that you can't do, some of which either might benefit you more now or more in the long term, but you can't use those same resources for those other things if you're doing it for this thing. Making a decision to do something is making a decision not to do the other things you could be doing with those resources. And it's a pretty basic concept when I put it that way, but I've noticed it seems like most people don't seem to understand that. And that makes sense. Like, so much policy debate is people not understanding opportunity costs. But as Bryan Caplan said in Myth of the Rational Voter, it is rational for voters to be what we would think of as economically irrational and economically ignorant. But the interesting thing is it's not just policy, and it's not just giving other people advice. People live their own lives is, did I do this thing? Did I like it? It's worth doing. And I think in some cases that can work for you. If you're that kind of person, if your life is where you want it, great. Like I recently saw an old video by Asmongold where he was talking about, hey, I'm happy with what I'm doing with my life now. I wouldn't want to do anything else, and I have the money that I could if I wanted to. And so I am just very happy with that. That's great if you're in that situation. But if you're not happy with your life, then you need to start thinking about how are you spending your finite resources on this planet? And I've talked about this book before. Greg McKeown really drills this in his book Essentialism, because I'd always understood the concept, but I hadn't really understood just how much, like a lot of the things that I was doing because I thought I was supposed to were blocking me from doing other things that would benefit me more. And I sort of understood that, but I didn't trust myself. And so I wanted to talk about this idea quickly because, again, I absolutely recommend reading this book, and Amazon frequently has it on sale for like $10, so at least the paperback. And I'm sure you can get it at your library because it's a pretty well-selling self-help book. But basically the point is, like, if you have maybe a couple major things you're trying to do with your life, doing them well enough to benefit from them, to be happy with them, are going to take up all of your time and energy on this planet, basically. So like for me, my two are, top one is I want to find a partner, have kids, educate them, have a better childhood than I did. And the second one is I want to write stuff and write the stuff that I want to write that hopefully people will read. And everything else that I'm doing is serving the end of one of those goals, primarily the first one, because I called it like I have 1.5 priorities. And he talks about, I've seen a few books talk about this. Priority was a singular until pretty recently because you can really only have one priority. But I've said like the two primary human social motivations are agency and communion. And so you have, I think, communion and agency goal, one of each. But beyond that, for me at least, I think it makes sense. Everything should serve one of those goals. So my communion goal is partner, kids. My agency goal is writing. And everything else, I mean, I often decide to do things that don't serve those goals, but I'm always asking myself, okay, is this, I know I'm making this trade-off of I'm not pushing myself forward. First of all, could I be doing something better with this time? And sometimes the answer is I'm just exhausted and no. And then if the answer is, yeah, I could, then it's, do I actually want to be doing this? And usually if I could be doing something else, the answer turns out to be, no, I don't want to be doing this, especially like doom scrolling internet stuff. But even stuff that you might enjoy, you might be happy you've done, still often just isn't worth it compared to what else you could be doing. Sometimes it's worth trying things to see, does this help? But even if something advances your goal, if it's not the best thing to advance the goal, then maybe don't do that. Like it's something I've understood for a long time, and I've had adults who seem to know things push back at me, and then I started to push back myself, and then finally I read this book and I really started to think about this, but it's something that it seems like most people just don't get. And so there's this idea of maximizing versus satisficing, which I actually got the book that introduced that, but it's in the other room. So maximizers are trying to make everything as good as they can, and that was what my mother would do, and it just burns you out to try to do that. Satisficing is, for the most part, you are just doing what works well enough. And basically my conclusion is that I say the best thing to do is to optimize, where you want to be maximizing your maybe one or two priorities and then satisficing on everything else. And that is basically, for the most part, what I try to do. And so I wanted to talk about this because I feel like not enough people understand this idea of opportunity costs at all. And I've tried to explain it to people who have straight up denied that you face these traits. Like I say, like you literally can't do all of this stuff with the time, money, and energy you have on this earth. And say, yeah, I can. Some people might point to people who do it, but they're like rich people with all sorts of connections and people doing stuff for them to make that possible. Like, if you are middle class poor, if you don't have people doing all the ancillary stuff, that's not an option for you. And I've also had people who say they get it and then act as if they don't and will still argue, like, hey, this thing could be good, you should do it. And I'm like, yeah, I'd probably enjoy this, but other things I could be doing. And when I was younger, I would do more things for the novelty value and be glad I did them. As I'm older, I'm like, yeah, no, I'm not doing that as much unless I think I really could learn something with it that makes it worthwhile. So I want to talk about that quickly. Thanks for watching. I'm Magpie. This is Leela, and we'll see y'all in the next one.